commenting on you don't think there's going to be enough oil. So do you think the world has reached the physical limits of oil production?
I don't think the problem is physical. I think the problem is geopolitical. I think that we need to have more proactive policies. We're not doing enough to stimulate the use of alternative energy. The 2007 energy bill helped try to push our car efficiency, but we could have done a lot more, and we need to be a lot more aggressive. And the reason that you can buy a car today that gets 40 miles to the gallon is because, 10 or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, the Japanese government had an aggressive policy. And if the United States would step up to the same plate and not lag behind, I really feel that this is something that we can tackle. And it doesn't have to lead to world war and famine and all these different things. I just think we need to have non-political solutions. We need to be nonpartisan. We need to stop favoring special interests. We need to have a national effort to utilize the solutions that are available to us, and they're there.
Okay. Well, do you believe there's any real reliable alternative to oil? There are many alternatives to oil. I think the question is, how long does it take us to scale those alternatives up to replace oil? I mean, you can't just replace oil overnight. It requires technology shifts. And you have to decide what your priorities are. I mean, we could, shift to coal, but then people are concerned about the carbon emissions that would entail. And so there really has to be a clear articulation of what the alternative energy is, how radical a policy it would take to propel it into the market at a faster rate, and how much that's going to cost. I mean, I don't think Americans are looking for a technology solution to fall down on earth from the government that they don't have to pay for, and that isn't likely to happen. Okay. Well, Mr. Simmons, I have a question for you. I have read that some believe that, have you heard of Canada's oil sands?
Yes.
Okay, they think that's a possible reliable source. Do you think that that's viable? And since it's above ground, do you see any additional problems extracting this type of oil?
Well, the Canadian oil sand technology has been around for about 30 years, so it's nothing new. It's a lot more economical with high oil prices. It wasn't with low oil prices. But the reality is, and I'll give you one very real example. Shell Oil Company's Athabasca Oil Sands project, which is producing 155,000 barrels a day, which is pretty insignificant when you look at a world consuming 85, 86, 88 million barrels a day. They want to expand that by 100,000 barrels a day. When they started first doing engineering drawings about 3 years ago, it was going to cost 4 billion Canadian, which was only 3 billion US. On their latest cost estimates, they now think it's going to cost $20 billion for the same 100,000 barrel a day increase, and that's before steel costs. It went up about almost double. So it's probably now maybe a $40 billion project. So they probably won't do it. But I think oil sands are real, but they are very low quality, and they take an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of potable water, and you end up with low quality oil. And so that you have to dilute with high quality oil to get synthetic crude. So to rely on that as a one-to-one replacement for light, sweet crude is basically just a tragedy. But too many people do.
So, are there any winners in the peak oil theory?
Sure. The companies that basically realize that this is the countries and the companies that realize this is a real problem and come to grips with it fast. I think someone's going to create some software that will allow companies and organizations to pay by productivity and liberate the workforce, and will end long-distance commuting, and that guy will become another Bill Gates. We're a software solution away from that. So there are some things that could be done very rapidly. We need to grow food locally, stop this globalization of our food, which was the energy embedded in that is unbelievable. We need to save old buildings because the embedded energy in it is far, far greater than tearing a building down and building a new building. So a lot of things we can do and we'll be forced to do. And I think the quicker we realize this is a real problem, it's not going away, the faster we'll do these things. And we can get through this all, but it's not going to be easy.
How do you feel about that, Amy?
Well, I think that, that a big step is to
get the companies that have the resources to invest. 2 years ago in 2006, the 5 largest oil companies raked in $150 billion in cash flow. They reinvested $56 billion in that, buying back their stock. I'm sure that helped the few people who are shareholders, but that didn't help having that $56 billion not go into investments in real and new energy was a real problem. And I think the companies are starting to recognize that. We need to see a lot more spending. If it was really true that you could, if you look at the finding cost for oil companies today, it's still between $5 a barrel and $15 a barrel, depending on the company. And it's kind of hard to understand. If you could spend $5 to find something and resell it for $112 a barrel, why you wouldn't be borrowing money and looking for every barrel you could find. Just this week, suddenly the producers of Alaska decided that they would actually build the pipeline to bring the Alaska gas down to the lower 48, but that gas has been there for decades. So you have to ask yourself, why are we only spending the money now? Why didn't we spend the money 10 years ago? What's the role of government policy? Matt mentioned a very important and interesting thing generationally. Lots of young people today don't all go to the same house to have a party. They chat over the internet. They see each other on cameras. They use Facebook. We really can change the lifestyle of everybody commuting an hour to go to work. There are a lot of things that'll change, and my opinion is that with smart policy, and if it turns out that the price of oil stays high, we'll get there. But I think the other thing to bear in mind is if we have a recession and the price of oil goes down, it doesn't mean we shouldn't still continue to do these things, because we need to get out of the cycle.
One last question.
Okay, one last question.
Matt, given the concerns of peak oil, that production has peaked, oil reserves are drying up, it's very expensive to get the oil that's there. There are no new oil reserves. If you follow the logic of peak oil, is the Trans-Texas Corridor a viable project? Because basically it's just going to put more cars on the road. It requires asphalt. It requires, all these petroleum-based products. But in truth, we're going to run out of oil in 50 years, why build the Trans-Texas Corridor?
Well, first of all, we won't run out of oil in 50 years. I think that's extremely unlikely. And I think one of the problems with people that that hear the peak oil thing and say, well, I just don't believe we'll run out of oil. Not a single person I know that thinks peak oil is a real issue thinks that we'll run out of oil for maybe 100 or 200 years. What I worry about is we might only be producing 30 or 40 million barrels a day 50 years from now, and that is a crisis beyond the wildest imagination. But that isn't running out. Then we shouldn't build that. We should actually start shipping goods back and forth using our waters. We should be very mindful of the fact that Mexico has a crisis on its hands. The Cantor oil field is in irreversible decline, and there's nothing coming behind it. So Mexico has about 2 or 3 more years before we'll have to stop exporting oil. So I think the whole relationship between Mexico and the United States is going to have a profound change when that happens, and it's happening.